Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Maya stood at the edge of the cliff, staring at the quiet sea below. The wind whipped her dark hair around her face, but she barely noticed. The ocean stretched out like a great gray void, an endless reflection of the numbness that had settled inside her. She hadn't planned to come here today. Her feet had carried her unconsciously, as if drawn to the spot where it had all started. It had been 2 years since the accident, but the pain felt as fresh as the day it had happened. The car, the screeching tires, the sound of metal crumpling like paper, those memories haunted her. Her mother's last scream still echoed in her mind, a sound that pierced through her dreams like a shard of glass, leaving her restless and hollow. Grief had become her constant companion, wrapping around her heart like a suffocating shroud. No matter where she went, it followed. She had tried to drown it in distraction, school, work, even friends, but it was always there, lurking in the background, waiting for the quiet moments when it could slip in and overwhelm her. Now, it seemed like she had run out of distractions. She heard about the dream maze from an old woman who sat at the park every day, talking to anyone who would listen. Most people dismissed the woman's stories as nonsense, but Maya had found herself lingering. According to the legend, the maze existed somewhere between dreams and reality. It was said that those who were brave enough to enter and find the heart of the labyrinth could claim a treasure beyond their wildest dreams. Maya had no interest in treasure. What she wanted, what she needed, was peace. If the maze was real, maybe it could offer her the one thing that had eluded her for so long, an escape. She didn't care if it was dangerous, didn't care if it was a myth. It was something, a faint hope, and that was more than she'd had in a long time. That night, when she went to bed, she closed her eyes and wished for the maze. She didn't know what she was expecting, but she was certain that nothing would happen. The world didn't work that way. You didn't just wish for something and have it come true. But when she woke up, the world had changed. Maya found herself standing in front of a towering archway. The sky above was a swirl of dark purples and deep blues, like the colors of twilight caught in a vortex. The archway, made of ancient stone, seemed to pulse with an energy that made her skin tingle. Beyond it stretched an endless maze, its walls rising high into the air, casting long, shifting shadows. The path twisted and turned, disappearing into darkness. She blinked, expecting the vision to fade, but it remained. This was no dream. For a moment, Maya hesitated. The weight of what she was about to do sank in. She didn't know what lay ahead or if she'd find what she was looking for, but the thought of turning back filled her with dread. Behind her was only pain. Before her, maybe something else. Taking a deep breath, she stepped through the archway. The air inside the maze was different, thicker, charged with an otherworldly presence that seemed to hum in the walls themselves. Each step she took echoed, though the sound quickly faded, swallowed by the vastness of the labyrinth. She couldn't tell how far she had walked when the first illusion hit. She found herself standing in her childhood home. The scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air, and sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a warm glow on everything. It was so real, so vivid, that for a moment, she thought she'd somehow gone back in time. Her mother stood by the stove, humming softly as she stirred a pot of soup. Her father sat at the dining table, reading the newspaper. Her younger brother, Ben, played with toy cars on the floor. Maya froze. This wasn't possible. Her family was gone, had been for 2 years. This was a dream. She clenched her fists, trying to ground herself, but the sight of her family, so alive, so whole, sent a wave of longing crashing over her. She wanted to run to them, to throw her arms around her mother and tell her everything, but something held her back. They weren't real. tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Her heart ached with the urge to stay, to sink into this illusion and never leave, but she couldn't. This wasn't the treasure she was looking for. With trembling hands, she turned away from the kitchen and walked out the door. The moment she crossed the threshold, the illusion shattered. The warmth, the light, the scent of cookies, all gone, leaving her standing in the cold, empty maze once more. She had to keep moving. Maya wasn't sure how long she wandered. The maze was a twisting, endless thing, with paths that seemed to loop back on themselves. There was no clear direction, no way to tell how far she'd come. Time seemed to blur, slipping away like sand through her fingers. It was during one of those endless stretches that she met her first companion. Kai appeared as if out of nowhere. One moment, Maya was walking alone, and the next, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, heart pounding, and saw a tall, broad-shouldered young man with tousled dark hair. He wore a leather jacket and carried a sword strapped to his back. His eyes, a piercing blue, flicked over her with casual interest. "Lost, too?" he asked, his voice light but edged with something darker. Maya didn't answer at first, her gaze narrowing as she studied him. She had no idea if he was real or another illusion. The maze had already shown it could play tricks on her mind. He seemed to sense her hesitation and raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm not here to hurt you. I've been wandering this place for a while now, trying to figure it out. Thought I was the only one here, but looks like I was wrong." Maya bit her lip, debating whether or not to trust him. The maze was dangerous, and she couldn't afford to let her guard down. But something about him seemed solid. Real. She could feel the weight of his presence, the way his voice echoed in the maze. "I'm not looking for trouble," Kai said after a long pause, his voice dropping to something more sincere. "Just looking for a way out." "Same as you, I bet." Maya sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. "Yeah," she said, her voice quiet. "Same as me." They walked together after that, an uneasy silence hanging between them. Maya wasn't sure she trusted him yet, but having someone beside her, even a stranger, made the maze feel a little less overwhelming. It wasn't long before they encountered the second companion. Allure was different from Kai in every way. Where Kai was brash and sharp-edged, Allure was calm and ethereal. She had long silver hair that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the maze, and her eyes held a deep, ancient wisdom that made Maya wonder how long she had been wandering here. Allure found them at a crossroads, sitting serenely on a stone bench as if she had been expecting them. Her gaze met Maya's, and for a brief moment, Maya felt as though the woman could see straight into her soul. "You've come far," Allure said, her voice soft but steady. "But the maze is not what you think it is." Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" Allure's gaze flicked to Kai, who leaned against the wall with a skeptical expression. "The treasure you seek is not gold or riches. The maze is a mirror. It reflects your deepest fears, your most hidden truths." Kai snorted, crossing his arms. "Great. Another cryptic guide." But Maya wasn't laughing. She could still feel the echo of her family's illusion lingering in her mind, the pain of seeing them again only to lose them once more. "If the maze is a mirror," she said slowly, "then what am I supposed to find?" Allure smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "The truth, child. You must face the truth." Maya didn't ask what that meant. Deep down, she already knew. The three of them moved through the maze in silence after that, the only sound the soft echo of their footsteps against the cold stone. Maya's mind was still reeling from Allure's words. She had come here looking for a way to end the pain, for something, anything, that could make the crushing weight of grief go away. But if what Allure said was true, then the maze wasn't here to offer her an escape. It was here to force her to confront the very thing she had been running from. Kai, ever the skeptic, kept muttering under his breath about how they were wasting time chasing shadows. "This is ridiculous," he grumbled, kicking a loose stone down the path. "We should be looking for the center of this place, not sitting around waiting for some mystical truth to smack us in the face." Allure merely smiled at him, unperturbed by his frustration. "The center of the maze is not a place, Kai. It is a state of being. You will know it when you are ready." Kai rolled his eyes but said nothing more. Maya, for her part, found herself caught between the two of them, torn between Kai's impatience to move forward and Allure's calm acceptance that the journey was more important than the destination. She didn't know which path was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Allure was telling the truth. As they continued deeper into the labyrinth, the walls seemed to shift, narrowing and expanding as if the maze itself were alive, reacting to their presence. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp stone and something else, something darker, like fear made tangible. Maya's chest tightened with each step, her pulse quickening as if the maze could sense her unease. Then, without warning, the next illusion hit was subtle at first, a flicker at the edge of her vision. She blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light, but when she turned the corner, the world around her changed. She was standing in a hospital room. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled her nostrils, and the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She recognized the room instantly. It was the ICU where she had spent those agonizing hours after the accident, waiting for news that she already knew would be bad. The beeping of machines, the shuffle of nurses, the low murmur of voices, everything was exactly as she remembered it, and there, lying in the bed, was her mother. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's face was pale, her body motionless beneath the crisp white sheets. The heart monitor beside her beeped steadily, but Maya knew it was only a matter of time before it would flatline. She had lived this moment once before, and it had broken her. Now, the maze was making her live it again. Her legs felt like lead as she moved closer to the bed, her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but face this again. But she couldn't look away. She couldn't leave her mother. "Maya," the voice was faint, barely a whisper, but it was enough to stop her in her tracks. Her mother's eyes fluttered open, locking onto hers with an intensity that made Maya's heart lurch. "Maya, I'm sorry." Maya froze, her mind racing. This wasn't right. Her mother had never spoken after the accident. She had been unconscious until the end. But now, here she was, looking at Maya with those familiar, kind eyes, her voice filled with sorrow. "I'm so sorry," her mother repeated, her voice breaking. "I should have protected you. I should have been there for you." Maya's throat tightened, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Mom, it wasn't your fault." "It was." Her mother's hand reached out, grasping Maya's wrist with a strength that surprised her. "I left you alone," her mother whispered, her grip tightening. "I abandoned you, and now you're lost. You don't know how to go on." Maya shook her head, the tears spilling over now. "No, it's not like that. I don't know how to live without you." The hospital room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing down as the weight of her grief threatened to crush her. She had been carrying this pain for so long, hiding it, running from it, but now it was here, inescapable. The illusion wasn't just showing her the past, it was forcing her to confront the truth she had been avoiding. Her mother's face softened, and for a moment, the room felt still. You don't have to forget me, she said, her voice a gentle murmur. But you have to keep living. You have to let go of the guilt. Maya blinked through her tears, her chest heaving with the effort to hold back sobs. I don't know how. Her mother's grip loosened, and she smiled, a small, sad smile. You do. You've always been stronger than you think. And then, just like that, the room faded. The sterile lights dimmed, the beeping of the machines quieted, and her mother's hand slipped from her wrist. Maya was left standing in the empty hallway of the maze once more, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She stood there for a long time, her shoulders trembling, her mind replaying the conversation over and over. It hadn't been real, she told herself. It was just another illusion, a trick of the maze meant to break her. But as much as she wanted to deny it, she couldn't shake the feeling that, somehow, her mother had been speaking the truth. The maze was forcing her to confront what she had buried deep inside, the guilt, the grief, the fear of moving on. Kai and Alara appeared at her side, their expressions unreadable. They hadn't seen what she had, but they didn't need to. The look on Maya's face told them everything they needed to know. You're not alone, Alara said softly, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. The maze is cruel, but it is also kind. It shows us what we need to see, even if it hurts. Maya nodded, though she couldn't bring herself to speak. Her mind was still reeling from the encounter, her heart heavy with the weight of her mother's words. Kai, ever practical, gave her a quick nod. We keep moving, right? That's all we can do. Maya swallowed hard and nodded in return. Yeah. We keep moving. And so they did. The maze seemed to grow darker as they pressed on, the walls closing in tighter, the air thick with tension. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the maze itself was bearing down on them. But Maya knew now that there was no turning back. The only way out was through. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the oppressive atmosphere pressing in around them. Maya could feel the presence of the maze, watching, waiting, testing her resolve. But she wasn't going to break. Not now. Not after everything. The final confrontation came sooner than she expected. The path ahead opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. At the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, and atop it sat a single object, a mirror. Its surface was smooth and reflective, but as Maya approached, she could feel the power radiating from it, pulling at her like a magnetic force. Kai and Alara hung back, watching as Maya stepped closer to the mirror. She knew, without being told, that this was the heart of the maze. This was the moment of truth. Her reflection stared back at her, unflinching. But as she looked deeper, she saw something more. The reflection wasn't just her, it was a version of herself she had been trying to hide. The girl in the mirror was weighed down by grief, consumed by guilt, haunted by the past. Her eyes were hollow, her face pale, her shoulders slumped under the weight of it all. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. This was who she had become. This was the person she had been hiding from, the version of herself she had refused to face, and now, there was no escaping it. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed the surface of the mirror. The reflection rippled, and for a moment, Maya felt like she was falling, tumbling into the depths of her own mind. The maze, the pedestal, the room, all of it faded away, leaving her alone with her reflection. I'm sorry, Maya whispered, her voice shaking. I'm so sorry for everything. The reflection didn't respond, but something in its eyes softened. The guilt, the pain, the fear, they were all still there, but they weren't insurmountable. They were part of her, but they didn't define her. Maya took a deep breath, her hand still pressed against the mirror. I forgive you, she said softly, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to herself or the reflection. Maybe both. The reflection nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and then the mirror shattered. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of glass breaking and stone crumbling. The pieces of the mirror scattered across the floor, glittering like stars in the darkness. And as the last shard fell, the maze began to dissolve, the walls crumbled, the darkness lifted, and the oppressive weight that had hung over them for so long vanished. Maya stood in the center of the room, her heart racing, her mind clear. For the first time in years, she had done it. She had faced the truth. And she had survived. Kai and Alara stepped forward, their faces filled with a mixture of awe and relief. They didn't need to say anything. Maya could see the understanding in their eyes. They had all been through the maze in their own way, and now, they were free. Without a word, they turned and walked away from the pedestal, leaving the shattered mirror behind. The exit was waiting for them.